The fire was dying low when I heard the hoofbeats. Not the even steady rhythm of a lone traveler, but the ragged pounding of a horse pushed near to breaking. I was crouched by the embers, a strip of jerky between my teeth, the weight of my colt heavy at my side. My body still ached from the ambush 3 nights past, the bruises on my ribs. The gash along my shoulder where lead had grazed, me but instinct kept me ready. A man doesn't survive bounty hunting, Indian wars, and years of riding the edges of hell without learning to listen. Andy rose, boots crunching in the hard earth, and stepped out where the moonlight spilled silver over Red Hawk Valley. The land was wide and empty, save for the broken fences and skeletal barn of my family's ranch, now half swallowed by weeds. Since Ma died 2 months back, the place had gone to rot. I'd spent most nights in the saddle, drinking more than working, avoiding the silence of the cabin. But tonight's silence had come hunting for me. The horse stumbled into view first, foam flying at its mouth. Then the rider, a wiry courier, face gray with dust hauled back the reins, nearly toppling off before he hit the ground. He thrust a letter at me without a word, eyes darting over his shoulder as if devils followed him. Then, with a jerk of his chin, he wheeled his horse and vanished into the dark, leaving nothing but the letter in my hand and the stink of sweat in my gut tightened. No man rode like that for a bill of sale or a ranch notice. I carried the envelope inside, lit the stub of a candle, and sat at the scarred table where Ma once kneaded bread. My name, Malcolm Crowe, was scrawled across the front in a hand I knew as well as my own scars. Jonah Pike, old war brother, the only man who'd pulled me out of more fires than I could count. I tore it open with fingers that trembled amid Bagai. Reckon you don't have much left to anchor you out there. And I know how a man can get lost staring too long at ghosts. I've taken a liberty, one you might curse me for now and thank me for later. There's a girl coming west, Clara Whitmore. She's educated, steady, and in need of a new start. I told her you're an honest man. She arrive on the stage at Red Hawk Station come the 12th. Treat her kindly. She could be the piece that steadies you yet. I read it twice, then a third time, until the words blurred. A mail-order bride, whether I wanted one or not. Jonah always did think he knew what was best for me. And maybe once he had. But he didn't know the things I'd done since the war ended. He didn't know how blood clung to a man, no matter how many rivers he crossed. I folded the letter, set it by the candle, and stared into the flame. The loneliness of the cabin pressed close, thicker than the shadows. I thought of Ma's voice, soft in my ear the day before she passed. You need someone to walk with you, son. Not just land. Not just cattle. Someone to share the silence. I'd laughed then, bitter and sharp. Now the words felt like prophecy, cruel as any bullet. I didn't sleep that night. When dawn bled over the valley, I saddled my gelding Duke and rode out to the ridges. The air was thin and sharp, smelling of pine and dust. Below me the land stretched wild canyons, sagebrush plains, the faint thread of the Yellowstone far off. Once I'd ridden that land-hunting men, trading their lives for bounty posters nailed in saloon windows. Their faces haunted me still. Would Clara Whitmore see those ghosts in my eyes the first time we met? By the time I turned back, my mind was no clearer. Only the weight of what was coming pressed heavier on my shoulders. Clara arrived on a Thursday. I was late getting to the station, the wheels of my wagon catching in the spring mud. When I rolled into Red Hawk Crossing, the stage was already there. Its horses lathered, its pie spotty swung down. She nodded once the words hut tea cleared my throat. We are inside. The cabin smelled of dust and loneliness. I lit a lamp, set her bag by the bedroom door. This was my mother's room, I said, voice catching on the word moth. It her eyes WWE, that morn she cut her words the sile. By midday we fell into rhythm. I mended fence posts while she swept the cabin, humming under her breath. The garden, though choked with weeds, bent under her care. I watched her from a distance, the way she straightened her shoulders against the wind, the way her lips moved in silent PR that night. As the sun bled red across the valley, I found myself speaking before I could stop. Tomorrow, we'll ride in. Her face paled, but she nodded. I didn't tell her that the town's curiosity would cut like a knife. I didn't tell her that Gideon Holt, the sheriff, still held grudges older than the both of us. Instead, I tipped my hat low, hiding the storm behind my eyes, and prayed once more that whatever lay ahead, she'd be strong enough to face it, because I wasn't sure I was. The next morning dawned clear, the kind of morning that tricks a man into believing the land isn't out to break him. Sun spilled over the valley, glinting off dew that clung stubborn to weeds. Clara was quiet through breakfast, her eyes drifting to the horizon, as though the world beyond my fence line still threatened to swallow her. I didn't press her. Some silence be mid-morning, the wagon was ready. Stuke tossed his head, snorting like he knew the road into town carried ghosts for both of us. Clara climbed up beside me, skirts brushing against my leg, and I felt the tremor in her hand as she steadied herself. The air between us was tight with, the trail wound through cottonwoods and sage. The wind tugging strands of hair loose from her bonnet. She kept her chin high, but I caught the quick dart of her eyes. The way she measured each shadow like it might reach out to claim her, that wariness struck me deep. I knew the look of a soul who'd learned too well that danger often see. We reached Red Hawk Crossing near noon. The town stretched small but stubborn a row of clapboard buildings leaning against the dust, their false fronts painted bright to hide the rot beneath. The smell of horses and wood smoke mixed sharp in the air. Folks stopped what they were doing as we rolled in, heads turning. Whispers buzzing like flea kept my gaze straight ahead, but Clara must have felt the weight of their stares. Her shoulders stiffened, lips pressed thin. When the wagon stopped outside the mercantile, Mrs. Aldridge appeared. Her bonnet starched to perfection, her eyes sharp as a hawk's. She offered Clara a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "So this is the lady," she said, voice sweet with poison. "Malcolm Crowe finally found himself a wife." "I was beginning to think the good Lord meant for you to live alone." Clara flushed, but before I could speak, she answered steady. A oath whisper that rippled down the boardwalk cut sharp. I saw Holt and Sheriff Gideon, Holt leaning in the shade by his office. Hat tipped low, smile like a snake's. He'd been gunning for me since the day I shot his brother in a fair fight. He gave Clara a long look before turning Crowe. He drawled, spitting tobacco into the dust. "Didn't figure you for the Mary." My hand twitched toward my belt before I stilled it. Holt wanted me to rise, to give him cause. Instead, I tipped my hat, voice flat. "Some of us El Claron Thaiswa, and which do you prefer?" she asked. The question hit like a hammer. I didn't answer right away. Thought of the men I'd hunted, the bounties I'd dragged back in irons or a coffin. Fear had been my trade once, but sitting beside Clara, I found no pride in it. "Neither," I said at last. "I'd rather be forgotten." She looked at me then, eyes searching, but she didn't press. That silence between us wasn't heavy this time. It was something else, something like understanding. That night a storm rolled in. The sky split wide with lightning, rain hammering the roof until it groaned. I was out by the garden when the wind picked up, trying to tie down a loose shutter. Turned and saw Clara, skirts whipping, struggling to secure the rows of herbs she'd planted that morning. Before I could shout, she swayed, then crumpled into the mud. I was beside her in a heartbeat, rain soaking us both. Her skin was cold, breath shallow. Panic clawed at me. Memories of Ma's last days flooded into how helpless I'd felt watching her fade. I lifted Clara into my arms, carried her inside, and laid her on Ma's old bed. Her eyes fluttered open, wild with fear. She thrashed until I caught her hands, speaking low. "You're safe, Clara. It's just me. Just Mack." Tears welled, spilling down her temples. Don't lock me away again, please." The words gutted me. Whatever scars she carried, they weren't only on her skin. I held her hand until her breathing eased, until sleep took her. Only then did I let go, though my hands trembled long after. By the next morning, storm had passed, leaving the world scrubbed clean. Clara sat by the hearth, pale but resolute. She wouldn't meet my eyes at first. When she finally spoke, her voice was steadier than I expected. "I faint, sometimes. It's been that way for years, my husband. He wouldn't let me see a doctor. Said weakness was sin. Rage boiled in me, hot and useless. I forced my hands flat on the table so she wouldn't see them shake. "You're not weak," I said, "and you'll see a doctor if you wish it." Her eyes flicked up, sharp, almost disbelieving. "Why do you care?" I didn't have an answer that would satisfy either of us, so I gave her the only truth I knew, because no one ever cared for me when I needed it. And I won't let that be your story too. For the first time since she'd arrived, her mouth softened, almost a smile. It was gone quick as it came, but it lingered in my chest like a coal-catching flame. The days that followed carried a strange rhythm. We worked side by side, mending, planting, repairing. She hummed sometimes as she baked, soft hymns that filled the cabin with warmth I hadn't felt in years. I caught myself watching her more than I should, the curve of her hands, the way her eyes lit when she coaxed life from the garden soil. But every joy carried its shadow. At night, I dreamed of gunfire, of faces I'd sent into the dirt. I'd wake with sweat cold on my skin, staring at the ceiling while Clara slept in the next room. I wondered if Jonah had cursed me by sending her here, binding her to a man who could never outrun his past. Still, one evening, as the sun bled out over Red Hawk Valley, she stood beside me on the porch. Her shoulder brushed mine, just barely, and neither of us moved away. The silence stretched long, easy for once. And in that silence, I felt it the faint, dangerous spark of hope. A man like me had no right to it. I held it all the same. The valley carried its secrets like dry earth carries the bones of buffalo buried, but never gone. After that night of the storm, Clara and I moved through our days with a fragile sort of peace. She tended the garden, her hands coaxing green life from the soil as though it were prayer. I worked the fences and stock, pushing back the ruin that had swallowed my ranch. For a time, it seemed as if we were building something, if not happiness, then at least a kind of belonging. Yet beneath it all, I felt the shifting of unseen ground. As if the valley itself held its breath, it was Clara who first heard the whispers. I'd gone to town for seed and nails, leaving her to barter with Mrs. Aldridge at the mercantile. When I came back that evening, she sat on the porch, her bonnet discarded, face pale as moonlight. She didn't look up when I reined in the wagon. "What is it?" I asked, though I already knew the answer was something I wouldn't like. Her voice trembled, but the words cut sharp. "I heard them talking behind the mercantile, where they thought I wouldn't hear. Kane has been paying Sheriff Holt, paying him to drive you off this land." My gut clenched. Richard Kane, a name I'd hoped would never darken my doorstep. The cousin of Clara's late husband's lick as oil, was crueler than rattlesnakes, and greedy enough to claim debt where there was none. I'd seen his type before. Men who wrapped themselves in law's clothing but dealt only in blood and gold. Holt was just the right kind of rotten to sell him his services. I knelt in front of Clara, but she turned her face away. "It's my fault, Mack. If I hadn't come, if I hadn't brought my past with me," I caught her hand before she could finish. "No," I said, low and hard. "Don't you carry the weight of another man's sins? Kane's choosing this, not you. Holt's choosing it too. The fault lies with them, not with you." Her eyes shimmered, and for the first time she didn't pull away. Instead, she whispered words I never expected. "You saved me from my past, Mack. Let me save you from yours." The world tilted. I'd spent years thinking myself beyond saving, marked by the blood of others, unworthy of any clean future. Yet here she stood, scarred and shaken, offering me the very grace I'd never believed was mine to hold. I swallowed hard, heat burning behind my eyes. "Clara," I rasped, "you've given me more already than I deserve. But if you'll have me not for appearances, not for obligation, if you'll stand by me because you choose it, then marry me." Her breath caught, and for a heartbeat I thought she might refuse. But then she nodded, slow, deliberate, like a woman signing her name to fate. Yes, that night, under a wide sky of cold stars, we spoke our vows not before preacher or paper, but before the land itself. The cabin walls, scarred with years of weather, bore witness as I placed my mother's silver band on Clara's finger. It fit, though not perfectly, and somehow that felt right. Nothing about us was polished or perfect, but it was ours. Our wedding night was tender, yet not without shadows. Clara came to me with trembling hands, her eyes bright with both longing and fear. I moved slow, careful as a man crossing a river in the dark. She clung to me, but when sleep took her, the past came with it. She woke screaming, thrashing against unseen chains. I held her until dawn, helpless as her cries tore through me. Long after she quieted, I lay restless, staring at the ceiling, realizing that love meant more than bodies entwined. It meant standing guard over her heart even when she was at war with herself. And it meant I could not let Kane or Holt or any ghost of our past stare down what fragile hope we'd built. It was a week later when Kane made his move. Red Hawk Crossing hummed with tension when I rode in for supplies, townsfolk partying as though my boots carried plague. Holt leaned lazy against his office rail, thumbs hooked in his belt, eyes glittering with malice. And there, striding down the boardwalk as though he owned it, was Richard Kane. He was dressed fine Eastern cut coat, polished boots, hat brim low. His smile was all teeth when he saw me. "Crowe," he said, voice smooth as whiskey gone bad. "You've got something of mine." "I don't reckon I do," I answered. Keeping my hand close to my Colt, "Clara Whitmore," he said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Widow of my dear cousin. She belongs to me now, on account of debts owed. Her late husband left behind obligations, and I aim to see them paid." A murmur swept the street. My jaw tightened. "She's no one's property, least of all yours." Holt stepped forward then, badge glinting in the sun. "Careful, Crowe. Man's got a lawful claim. Might be best you hand her over before things get ugly." Ugly? The word tasted like ash. I'd lived most of my life in ugly, and I knew it well. But when I looked at Holt and Kane standing side by side, I felt something stronger than fear, resolve. Clara had chosen me, and I'd be damned before I let either of those jackals drag her back into chains. "I'll see you in hell first," I said. The crowd gasped. Kane's smile twisted, but he didn't draw. Not then. He had other plans. Plans that would bleed out soon enough. That night, Clara found me on the porch, staring at the horizon as the sun sank crimson behind the hills. She slipped her hand into mine, her ring cool against my skin. For a long while we said nothing. Then she spoke, voice quiet but firm. "They won't stop. Mack, Kane won't. Holt won't. You can't fight them both forever. I can try." She turned my hand over, traced the scar that ran across my knuckles. "You've carried enough violence. Don't let them drag you back into it. Promise me you'll hold to the man you are now, not the man you were." Her words struck deep, but I couldn't promise what I didn't know I could keep. Still, I cupped her cheek, kissed her forehead. "I'll fight for us, Clara, whatever it takes." The stars blinked awake overhead, but sleep came thin and restless. My dreams filled with gunfire, with Holt's smirk, with Kane's teeth gleaming like a wolf's. I should have known the challenge would come. By dawn, the town was buzzing. Kane had called me out. High noon, Main Street, pistols. A duel as old as the West itself. Refuse, and I'd be branded a coward, ripe for Holt to hound off my land. Accept, and I might not live to see Clara's face again. Clara begged me not to go, tears streaking her cheeks. "They'll kill you. They'll cheat, I know they will." I kissed her, held her close. "Then I'll cheat them first." When the hour came, I walked down Red Hawk's Main Street, boots heavy in the dust, hat brim low against the sun. The townsfolk lined the boardwalks, hushed and hungry for blood. Holt stood grinning by the jailhouse, hand resting on his revolver like a judge at sentencing. Kane waited at the far end, pistol gleaming at his hip, coat flaring in the breeze. Our eyes met. Time slowed. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, each breath like fire. A hawk cried overhead. Somewhere behind me, Clara's voice broke, praying my name. The call came. My hand moved of its own will, years of killing etched into bone. The Colt roared, the kick jolting up my arm. Kane's shot went wide, shattering a window. Mine found flesh. He staggered, eyes wide with shock, before collapsing into the dust. The crowd erupted, some gasping, some cheering, some cursing. Holt's smirk faltered, but he said nothing. Not yet. I holstered my gun, the silence in my chest louder than the echoes of the shot. Kane writhed once, then lay still. Blood pooled into the dirt, dark and final. Another ghost to join the rest. I turned and walked back to Clara. Her hands shook as she gripped mine. Her eyes burned fierce. "You came back," she whispered. "I always will," I said. Though we both knew promises like that were fragile as glass in this land. But Kane's death was not the end. That night, his men came, riders in the dark, faces masked, rifles cracking through the night air. The ranch shuddered under the siege. I fired from the porch, bullets sparking off stone, while Clara stood beside me, rifle braced against her shoulder. She missed her first shot, tears streaming down her cheeks. But when one of the men charged close, she steadied, pulled the trigger, and dropped him. Her hands shook, but her aim was true. By dawn, the ground was littered with spent shells and bodies. The barn smoldered, half-burned, but the cabin stood. Clara collapsed into my arms, sobbing with fury, with grief, with release. I held her, my heart breaking with pride and sorrow both. She'd found her courage in the fire, but I wished she'd never had to. We sat by the wreckage as the sun rose, the smoke curling around us like ghosts. Clara turned to me, eyes raw. "You'll see me as ruined now. As damaged goods? You must." I dropped to my knees before her, voice hoarse. "Clara, you're the strongest soul I've ever known. You're not my burden. You're my salvation." Her tears fell, but she smiled through them. In that moment, I knew the truth. Whatever hell the world hurled at us, we would face it together. Months later, spring came hard and fast, storms sweeping across the valley. One night, thunder shook the cabin walls as Clara labored, her cries mixing with the storm's fury. I held her hand, helpless, praying to every god I'd ever cursed. At last, with one final cry, the storm broke not just outside, but in our lives. She placed our daughter in my arms, tiny and wailing, fierce as the prairie wind. "Hope," that was the name Clara whispered. "Hope, Crowe." I wept then, unashamed, as the storm rolled away and dawn touched the world new. Sheriff Holt had fled town, his corruption laid bare. Kane lay in an unmarked grave beyond the creek, and here in my arms was proof that even in the harshest land love could take root. As the sun rose over Red Hawk Valley, Clara leaned against me, our daughter nestled between us. For the first time in years, the silence of the land felt like peace, not punishment. We had survived. We had begun anew, and I swore, as long as breath filled my chest, I would never let the darkness take this from us.